Purpose, a caring approach to business. Welcome, everybody!
Make a list of everything on this earth that you want to change, and at the top, print your own beautiful name and start from there. A few lines from one of my favorite poems, Evolution, by Andrea Gibson. Welcome to Pollinating Purpose, a caring approach to business. I am your host and queen of impractical road trip snacks, Miriam Wulici. I am also the Social Enterprise Program Manager and Coach here at Pillar. For those of you who are new here, Pollinating Purpose is a show all about supporting organizations who seek to create social impact through their work. Whether a nonprofit, for-profit, or grassroots organization, you'll learn key considerations to starting or growing your social impact business in a long-term and sustainable way. Today, we will be chatting all things social finance with my dear colleague, Filsan Farah. Filsan has a background in community development, livelihood programs, project development, and advancing social support for newcomers. She is dedicated to advocating for racialized peoples and historically marginalized peoples. Filsan is passionate about connecting with others, cross-sectoral initiatives, and contributing to the creation of more inclusive and just systems. Filsan joined the Pillar team last year as the program lead for Verge Capital, a social finance program of Pillar nonprofit in collaboration with Libro Credit Union, London Community Foundation, Sisters of St. Joseph, and SVX. It's been an absolute treat getting to know Filsan through our work together, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to chat with her today. Hey, Filsan.
Hey, Miriam.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for being here.
Oh, great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so before we kind of get into all the different conversations around social finance, I was hoping you could share a little bit more about Verge Capital and your role here at Pillar.
Yeah, absolutely. So Verge Capital is a social finance program of Pillar nonprofit in partnership with London Community Foundation, Sisters of St. Joseph, SVX, and Libro Credit Union. And so as a social finance program of Pillar nonprofit, what we do is we offer different tools in social finance and instruments. And the tools that Verge uses is funds. So we have two funds, the Startup Fund and the Breakthrough Fund. And the Startup Fund, so these are loans that we provide to social enterprises located in Southwestern Ontario. And the loans for the Startup Fund are really for early stage social enterprises. Right. Whereas for the Breakthrough Fund, it's for those that are established and looking to grow. And so my role is the program lead of Verge Capital.
Cool. Okay, so for the Startup Fund, it's more like maybe smaller amounts sort of to help folks get started and to really get that traction?
Yeah, exactly. So the actual amounts are anywhere from 10,000 maximum to 100,000. Okay. Whereas for the Breakthrough Fund, where this is a social enterprise, for instance, that's already been existing for about 3 years and looking to go further. And so maybe their need would be for higher capital. So what we offer is a minimum of 10,000 up to a maximum of 500,000.
Okay, cool. And then, so for the Verge process, so it's not you who's like going through and evaluating and deciding who gets the funds, I'm assuming?
Yeah, no, great point. It definitely is not me. So all of our due diligence is done by SVX, so our partners there. And Libra also plays a big part in looking into the financial aspect of the due diligence as well. So yeah, it's definitely not me. I'm more of helping the investees first point of contact, guiding them through the process, connecting with them, really helping once they do become part of Verge Capital, helping with any tools and resources that might further help them, and helping them with networking and anything like that. But as far as the due diligence, that's definitely not me, not my expertise there.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so social finance has been a hot topic lately, particularly in the social impact sector, but it's certainly not a new concept by any means. Can you share a little bit about where the idea of social finance really originates from?
Yeah, great question. It's definitely one of those things that, the last 10 years, we hear social finance, and all its terms and, buzzwords here and there. So it's great in terms of awareness, but really good to also take a step back and really think about, well, this is not something new. like you just indicated. I mean, if anything, it's hard to pinpoint where it originated, because given that it's about communities and really community involvement, people coming together. So we really see social finance being used everywhere across the world. So we can't really say, well, this originated in this part of the world or by these people. So we really know that, especially in BIPOC communities, it's something that's been existing for centuries. And that's just how people who had barriers accessing traditional financing institutions, they just came together as communities. So seeing this community was the heart of this. It's really hard to pinpoint, but we see it everywhere. I mean, here in Canada, we've seen it within the faith-based communities. We've seen it with BIPOC communities. Outside of the European world, the Western world, we've seen it too in rural places of sub-Saharan Africa. So it's something that's really been existing for some time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have memories of folks in my parents' community back in Tanzania pooling together money to send kids to higher education and things like that. So yeah, it took me a while to realize that that's what social finance was and to make that connection. But ultimately, yeah, it's community coming together to fund something that will be supportive of the betterment and the growth of the community, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if anything, it's that the terminology has caught up to the community work that's been done for so many years.
Yeah, that's such a great way of putting that. Awesome. Thanks, Filsan. Okay, so often with social enterprises and social impact organizations, folks typically lean into granting options rather than loan options. I see it all the time in my work. People will come looking for social enterprise support and are really interested in how they can access non-repayable funds, so grants or bursaries or things like that. Why might someone want to consider a loan instead of a non-repayable grant?
Right. So really important difference. I mean, grants are great in that they're non-repayable. However, they do come with some restrictions. Not only that, they're also really competitive, and it's something that it's hard to gauge if it's something that's going to be available this year or next year. It's something not really safe to depend on security-wise. But as far as restrictions, it's also sometimes location-based, industry-focused, and you can't really, use those the grant funding for anything that you would like to for your social enterprise. It has to be for very specific. If you're applying for a grant, as most grants applications come with very significant specifics where you can use those monies towards. Whereas loans, it's more. There's obviously the terms of the loans that are specific, as per each lender. But there are no restrictions in what you can use them. So when you're a social enterprise and you're looking to grow, loans offer some flexibility in that you have the decision of where you want to put this towards your operational scales, towards your research and development. So there's really no say there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also because a social enterprise, you can be nonprofit or for-profit. Absolutely. When you're a social enterprise, you still have that impact orientation, but your governance model might not necessarily make you available to a lot of granting options. And yeah, that's such a good point around, yes, you don't have to pay the grant back, but you still are accountable to the funding bodies. So whether it's, these really onerous reports, which are valid because they're giving you money, they want to make sure it's going to, what the outline of the grant says, but the reporting can be quite intense. And if you don't have the staff capacity or the labor capacity for that, it's a pretty significant toll on your labor, which may or may not take away from actual operations of the work that you're doing, which is, I think a really good thing to consider. So, it's always that conversation of loans are great and grants are great, and it's really just deciding which one makes the most sense for you.
Exactly. And like you mentioned, especially with social enterprises, when you're really starting and you're figuring things out, everything's a first, in that instance. It does take that capacity of you need more people. You need, so having the capacity to complete these reportings, and these grant reportings it's not just a one-time thing. It's during the course of, funders want to see where that money's going, if it matches to the applications that were sent. So all this stuff, it does take a lot of time and capacity. Whereas with loans, you don't have to, there is, depending on the lender, impact-wise, right? So for instance, when we're talking about social finance, we want to check in and know where that impact, how that's growing. But in terms of, the reportings, the very rudimental and aspect of that, that's not something that's would be applicable for loans.
Yeah, it's very much like at the end of the day, they want to see the repayment.
Right.
And so, yes, that is like something to be mindful of. And it is just, if you can pay the money back, you're paying the money back. And that's kind of your responsibility. If you're doing the work, then your impact already aligns with that.
Exactly, and it also helps with the growth in terms of business as well. Just that understanding of accountability, but in terms of loans. Whereas moving forward, I mean, especially social finance being that the bringing together of the finance, but also the generating of community and positive impact. So the loan kind of actually works in both in that sense too.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, we're kind of talking about lending, and lending can also happen from a traditional financial institution, like, your standard bank that you might see. So how does social finance differ from the traditional lending models that you might be used to?
Right. So there are a few ways that we differ from traditional financial institutions, but really the central element of any of those differences is the focus. So the focus of social finance lending institutions is really the impact. So impact is the central core of why we're participating in these instruments, like loans, like funds, like we do at Verge. So everything that follows is really just circling around the focus of the community positive impact that's going back into our communities. Whereas for financial institutions, the central focus is, the financial return. And also the structure is different. A lot of these social finance programs are really from nonprofit organizations, community-driven organizations. Whereas for financial institutions, it's a private profit. So they have investors and shareholders, and everything is really focused around that. And so the difference, being for community and the positive impact for social finance programs, we're able then to have a lot more innovative ways of lending. And anytime community comes together, we're able to see different elements in a different way. We're able to remove restrictions. So for instance, things like barriers that, maybe credit barriers, entrance barriers. If you're looking at community and positive impact as the core, then you're able to play around a bit and while still maintaining the proper framework, but still, being able to find innovative ways to lend.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like a lot of folks who go into social enterprise models or social impact organizations, they're doing it from a place of lived experience and lived expertise. So, they might have a personal connection to the communities that they're trying to serve. And so that may or may not mean that they are coming from marginalized communities or underserved communities. And that could have an impact on what kind of credit they have if they have like quote unquote good credit. And that's something that's come up a lot as well when I've encouraged folks to think about whether or not a loan is something of interest. It's like, well, I don't have good credit. I don't have any credit. And so, having the flexibility with social finance of saying, we're not actually looking at credit. I remember James, your predecessor and my former colleague, hi James, he once mentioned that, it's really about investing in the person and believing in the person and what they're capable of. And yes, there still needs to be, a viable model and a proof of concept that can show that this can be something that works. But ultimately, it's really investing in the person and not, what that person has, so to speak, which was a really interesting way to put that.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of our process as well as, during our application process, like you mentioned, credit being a barrier for a lot of people, particularly newcomers, right? So the matter of not even having credit already starts you off at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So, ways that we mitigate that, being that our central focus is the impact, is we're able to say, okay, we won't look at credit, but let's look at the central core. It's not to say that just because you don't have credit doesn't mean your business plan is not something feasible, right?
Yeah,
so let's look at the core of the business. Let's look at the impact.
Perfect. Yeah. And, if someone is looking into social finance and getting funded through something like Verge, where's a good place for them to start getting ready? We're saying you don't necessarily have to have good credit, but what are some things that they might to have available to them or offer to show the panel that this is something worth investing in?
All right. So this is something that, would differ from funder to funder, but specifically for us at Verge, business plan, having a business plan, having a clear, developed idea of the social impact being a central focus of your social enterprise, and the revenue generating model. So really, beyond the ideation, just putting that to paper, putting that into a business plan, and we're more than willing to always help investees walk through the process and develop. As you and I, work with a lot of the investees, it's something that's possible. But really, having the business plan is a big is a first place to start.
Yeah, for sure. And we've had the conversation with Julie in previous episodes about business plans, and something else that I find to be really useful in being able to develop a robust business plan is, that proof of concept. So being able to pilot something, you have your idea, you think you know how you want your revenue generating model to work, and you won't know until you know. So actually testing it out, even if it's on a smaller scale, it doesn't need to be the kind of end plan of things, but just giving it that chance to try it out and say like, okay, yes, the audience that I think would be interested is actually interested, or people, there is enough of a market here for me to have multiple sales, or whatever it might be. That proof of concept I think is also a really, really handy thing to have.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's more and more easier to develop the pilot and proof of concept in this day and age. You're able to implement things online. You're able to do trial based with just community members as well. So it's definitely a good place to start. Yeah.
And we touched a little bit on the impact side of things being important for social finance and for something like Verge. So would it also be useful for folks to have an impact model and a thought process behind how they might measure the impact that they're trying to have? Would that be useful as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that, as we're communicating with investees when they first come on, a lot of the terminology is, their focus is, I have this great idea and it's going to contribute to community good. And that's a great place to start. And then you have the business plan. But when we start talking about impact measurement, sometimes the terminology can just be a bit maybe they're not familiar with. And that's okay. We're here to assist them in that process. But it can be really not a daunting thing. It can be very simple as, I'm contributing to our community's good, and this is how I want to track that. Just starting at that place. Okay, so this is the good that we want to, contribute. But how can we measure that? So whether it is through, if it's a circular food enterprise, okay, how many where is this food going? How many people are benefiting from this, right? Yeah. So just starting out like that is a really good place too when you're thinking about impact measurement.
Yeah, and then I know Verge also has an eye to the SDGs, so the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the SDGs also provides a framework of measurement, right? It's that common language that we talked about with Luis a few episodes back. So yeah, even just, if you don't know where to start, you could start somewhere like the SDG framework, or, even B Corp. We talked about B Corp as well. Like, they provide frameworks to understanding how to measure things, measure impact. So it could be as simple as, this is how I want to see things change in my community. That's great. And then also, if you wanted to go into a little bit deeper, I imagine they could also use those SDG frameworks or B Corp frameworks, anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a great point, Miriam. And the SDGs, their website, the United Nations, they have a great step-by-step process and just helping people on board and reducing the pains of understanding terminology. Because a lot of times that is really the most difficult part in really getting on board. So it is definitely a lot easier than the past. Yeah.
And so from my experience with Verge, there's kind of a whole spectrum of organizations and interests that can be funded. So you've started at a really interesting time when we're kind of going through the process of looking at past investees and bridging over into new investees. What have been some of the most interesting ones that you've seen, or that like you're kind of really interested in, either in like investees that we've funded or just concepts that you've seen come through?
Yeah, oh God, the sector is just, it's so diverse. And anytime I connect with the investees, just the innovation that's going on and just their thought process, it's remarkable. But for me personally, some of the great ones, and you and I have talked about Salta Leisure before. So they're just a remarkable group who, just really disrupted an area of, athletic wear. But is athletic wear accessible to everybody? So people who may have different restrictions, maybe they're differently abled, right? So just removing that and making athletic wear accessible to them too, and still very appealing, right? Removing that also understanding that maybe fashion isn't fashion in that sense, but it really much is. So that's one of the ones that really, I think off the bat I was really drawn to. And we also have Future of Good. I mean, they're really great in terms of just journalism for change makers, right? So specific to strengthening change makers, and change makers can be from any sector, right? Nonprofit, NGO, so private sector. So bringing a core focus on change makers and informing them. So things like that are just remarkable.
I always forget that we have, like, that Future of Good has gone through the Verge process. They're a really great organization for journalism who's like very, I would say investigative, maybe isn't the right word, but they ask the hard questions, which I really appreciate, and is really needed in this sector, because it's easy to become compliant and complacent with the norm that happens in the nonprofit sector, particularly with the past few years of difficulty through the pandemic. But it's always good to question how things are being done, and they do a really good job of that.
Absolutely. I mean, take a step back and examine ourselves too. I think we often had a lot of questions we have for the private sector, which is great. But also let's maybe look at questions for ourselves too. Just maybe the only way we can improve is just by having those moments. So definitely a lot of great work being done in that space by Future of Good.
So if someone is interested in going down the route of applying for Verge, they're in Southwestern Ontario, they've met the criteria, what does that process look like for them? Like, what could they expect to see and hear from that process of starting and showing an interest to actually potentially and ideally getting those funds?
Yeah, absolutely. So first step is, we get our applications via our website, verge.ca. So the intake process really starts there. And that's where we ask the investees to let us know about their social enterprise, what they need the funding for, just really getting a sense of the impact as well. And from then on, we connect with them, and that can look like anything from a phone call to a Zoom meeting, whatever really fits best for them and what they're most comfortable with. And then during that conversation, we're able to do a deeper dive of looking at the business model, looking at where does this fit for Verge? Would it be for a startup fund? Would it be for a breakthrough fund? So we let the investees know of our two loans, our two different funds, and the loan terms that they might be looking at. But really, it's up to us to see where that fits. So let's say then the investees may be a breakthrough fund. So then what that would mean is their social enterprise is a larger scale. So maybe it's something like an affordable housing project or a community center. And then from then on, we look into the due diligence process. So we really, our partners at SVX at that point get involved and start doing all the due diligence work there. And before that, the business model, all that documents is something that, we know they have at that point. Then it goes to the due diligence phase. And once the due diligence process is finished, so we're able to know yes, this is something we're going to go forward with. And at that point, what we do is a pitch presentation. So the way we're set up, our review panel, so these are members coming from really Southwestern Ontario, but also some in different places in Canada who have a range of expertise from different sectors, financial institutions, traditional, academia. We really have people from the legal side, accounting, so really just a good group of people who are able to gauge and look at things in different perspectives and share that. So then the investees will be presenting their business model and case and the ask and what they're going to be using the ask for to the review panel. And so the investees are let know what the whole process looks like, but we do a good job in really preparing them. I think a lot of these pitch presentations sometimes can be overwhelming. So we really work with the investees and just letting them know what to expect. And, we can have a call with them before they can do a mock presentation, with us too, right?
Yeah.
So when they get to the point of the pitch presentation with the review panel, that's really the opportunity to, I think Shark Tank, these are some of the things, the ideas that we have when we think about pitch presentations. So, they have that opportunity to speak to them and to be asked questions, have a presentation. And I think what differs maybe from, in this sense, from what people would think about a pitch presentation is it's really collaborative. So the investees are really given feedback. So whether the response is a yes or a no, it's not a final no if it's a no.
Right.
So they're given feedback and let know that, hey, if you work on this and this and this, you would actually be a good fit for not only Verge, but also if you're applying for anything else. So we really, our review panelists really help them in that sense too. So say it's a yes, and from then on, then we let the investees know when it's a yes. So the review panel, they really gather after the investees exit, and that's where that room of discussion, the yes and no, the investees aren't around for that, as you would imagine. Yeah. And so when it's a yes, then it goes to our board. And then the board approves it, and then we let the investees know, and then the funds are deployed as of then.
Cool. So before we finish up, I'd love for you to share with folks, where can they find out more information about you, about Verge, the work that you do? Where can folks keep up with Verge? Yeah,
first great place would be our website at verge.ca. Also, since we're a program of Pillar nonprofit, signing up to Pillar's newsletter would be a great way to also get updates as to what's going on with Verge and other things in the social finance sector as well.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Filsan, for sharing with us. And social finance is something that I've always been really interested in. It's something that's also new to me, but is an area that I think, as someone who is interested in investing in community in a variety of ways, the financial element is also, kind of top of mind too. So I'm super grateful for all the conversations that we're able to have and for you to share social finance conversations with the rest of us. So thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great to be here and engage with everyone. And hopefully I've given a bit of insight into the world of Verge and social finance.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Filsan. Thank you once again to Filsan for sitting down with us and sharing such great insights on social finance and giving us a better understanding of what this concept all means. If you'd like to learn more about Verge Capital, you can check out Verge's website at vergecapital.ca. You can also check out some of our current investees there, the criteria for applicants, and send in an inquiry form that goes directly to Filsan. There's also some really great information around the SDGs and the framework that they use for evaluating impact if you're curious about that. If you'd like to know more about Pillar social enterprise work in general, you can visit pillarnonprofit.ca/social enterprise for those details. There you'll find links to some resources around social impact and impact measurement, once again, as well as links to things like this podcast and the inquiry form to chat with me as well. Once again, I am your host, your guide, your business bud, Miriam Waliji, and this has been Pollinating Purpose, a caring approach to business. Thank you for being here. I am so glad that you're along for the ride.